Hello, saver. Whether you're saving for that trip to the tropics or saving for an emergency, now is the time to take advantage of Wells Fargo's savings options. Wells Fargo offers savings accounts that can help you save towards your goals. So, what are you saving for? Visit a Wells Fargo branch or wellsfargo.com/save to open a savings account today.
Wells Fargo Bank, N.A., member FDIC.
Fargo, the new virtual assistant from Wells Fargo, makes banking faster and easier. Like this.
Fargo, what's my checking account routing number?
And this.
Fargo, turn off my debit card.
And this.
Fargo, what did I spend on groceries last month?
And that's just the beginning. Do you, Fargo? You can. In the Wells Fargo mobile app. Learn more at wellsfargo.com/getfargo.
Terms and conditions apply. Your mobile carrier's availability and message and data rates may apply. Wells Fargo Bank, N.A., member FDIC.
So our podcast is called Right and Wrong.
Are these your notes?
These
Are these your notes about what we're going to say?
Anything.
Nailed it.
Is the short answer.
So how many novels did you not finish?
Oh my God, so many.
It was perfect. What's she talking about? This is nonsense.
Ooh, a spicy question. I love it.
This is it, guys. The big secret to getting published is you have to write a good book. You heard it here first. Hello, and welcome back to the Right and Wrong podcast. Today, I'm joined by an author whose debut novel is coming out very soon on January the 5th, 2023. I'm very happy to introduce Rebecca Ryan. Hi, welcome to the show.
Hello, thank you for having me.
So, when I first read the blurb for your novel, I was sold immediately. Why don't you, for me and everyone listening, tell us what My Extraordinary Life is all about?
Yeah, of course. I mean, that is very good to hear about the blurb because I guess that's the job. That's them doing their job, the blurb doing its job properly. So that's great. But yeah, My Extraordinary Life is about Emily, who is basically completely average in every way. So that, the stuff that I don't know about human averages is ridiculous. She has like an average number of bodily moles. She's got an average blood group. Everything about her is average. And for various reasons, she feels this pressure to become extraordinary and to live this sort of amazing life. And so it follows Emily on her, her journey basically to become extraordinary. And, each little sort of challenge she sets herself, well, they never go quite to plan. So it's about her figuring out what sort of makes a life extraordinary and what makes a life worth living, I guess. It's just about an ordinary person, which is quite strange, really, to write a book about someone who is, when I think about characters in books, I always think about, someone who is amazing or who does something sort of spectacular, but it's kind of the exact opposite of that, really, which, I think when I first had to sort of start talking about it and I'd say, it's about this really ordinary woman and everyone would be like, oh, that sounds awful. So I've had to sort of get a bit better at trying to sell it. But yeah, she tries to become extraordinary. I think like a lot of us do. Sometimes we think, what are we doing? And is this enough? So she asks herself all those questions that we all ask ourselves sometimes.
Yeah. Well, I think there's a big shift moving towards relatability in not just books. You see it in television, things like that, where I think people are looking for someone that they can really identify with versus, a superhero or a, superpowered being that can do everything without thinking. So these kinds of stories, I'm always really, really drawn to them because there's a level of empathy that I think you can reach with these, which you can't reach with, your traditional heroic mythological characters.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's what I like to read as well. And that's what I like to see, and I think Emily hopefully is really relatable. That's what I wanted her to be. And I think it's that thing of, that sort of phrase that people roll out, you're never lonely if you've got a book. And I think it's that sense of if you're reading something and you see your own thoughts and feelings and experiences sort of reflected back at you, there's something really powerful in that. And that's what I like to see. I was a history teacher before I became a writer. And, I like a good story about Henry VIII or William the Conqueror, like as much as the next person. But I'm really interested in the medieval peasants or Tudor farmers. It's like ordinary people. And and their stories that really interest me, because we are the majority. We make up the majority of humanity. Most people aren't going to end up in a history book or anything like that. So it's those stories that I find really interesting. So I guess that's what drew me towards the genre. And even though my second book isn't about Emily, I think I'm just attracted to the stories of ordinary people and sort of people just going about trying to live their day-to-day lives and trying to live them well, and sometimes getting it right and sometimes thinking, wow, that was a disaster, like I've not got that right at all. Because that's what we all do. We're all just sort of fumbling around in the dark trying to get through it.
That's the human experience. Like what you're writing about is the real human experience, not the sort of fantasized, exaggerated version that most stories are telling.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's what I really enjoy. It's this sense of, I think it's like there's almost something like transcendental about it. Even though it doesn't matter what age we're born in or, where we're born, there are these common human sort of experiences and, these common feelings and thoughts that we all have. And I think there's definitely like a comfort in that. And also it's, I think you're right. If you sort of dig down deep into it, it's, the essence of what it is to be human, and that's just like endlessly fascinating to me. Yes. Other people probably don't spend quite so much of their time thinking about this sort of stuff. But yeah, I just find it ridiculously interesting. Like, I really like awful people, other people, if someone's awful, I think, I'm going to steer well clear. I'm kind of drawn to them because I just think, like, what is making you tick? Why are you being like this? So I think I'm just really interested in humans and the human experience. So, I mean, I'm absolutely not claiming that I've captured this in the book. I like to put that out there.
You've solved it.
That, I've had a go, but I wouldn't say I've like captured the essence of humanity, but it's what I'm drawn to and what I find interesting.
Yeah. I think secretly deep down, we're all on the same page here. I mean, that's why, a lot of the time people are much bigger fans of the villains than they are of the heroes, because often the villains have much more interesting motivations in stories.
Yeah, absolutely. I love writing villains as well. Actually, I'm working on my edits for book 2, and my editor's like, your baddie is really bad. You need to like turn it down a bit. Like, I've gotten really carried away in making them awful. But they are interesting. I think as well, like a lot of us I certainly spend a lot of time thinking like, I hope I've been like received okay. I hope what I've said is okay. I've not upset anyone, or I hope they've taken that in the way it was intended, which probably makes me an awful person to write a book and get reviews. But here we are. But I just find it amazing that some people are not having those thoughts. Like, they're just out there being horrible to people and just sort of getting on with it. And I just think that's amazing. Like, it must be so freeing not to care how people receive you. So I guess because they're like the opposite of how I am, I just find that so interesting.
So you mentioned that you're working on your next book. Let's look the other direction. And I wanted to ask, is this My Extraordinary Life? Is this the first novel that you'd ever written?
Yes, it is. Yeah, it's the first adult novel I'd ever written. So I actually had the idea for it like years ago when I was 12, actually. And I watched. So Emily, my main character, it opens with her watching a TV series about human averages. And it's the same as the one that I watched when I was 12. I know I was 12 because I've Googled it since. And, it was that Dr. Robert Winston, I think, who did a sort of TV series about, just all about like when the average human, so starting from pregnancy, so how long is the average pregnancy, when does the average human sort of walk, talk, right the way through to what does like an average death look like, what are we dying of on average. And I've just found it really, really interesting, really fascinating. But at the time, I still remember thinking it was kind of sad, that you're reducing a human life to these facts and statistics, which obviously you can do, but there's a huge amount more that's going on behind those. So I'd had the idea for like a long time. I'm 36 now, so it's taken me a long time to get around to writing it. And I guess the tipping point was I had my daughter when I was 30. I had my first little girl, and weirdly, I got a sleeper, so I got a baby that slept all the time. I've not got another one, but my first one slept a lot. So I was at home with this baby that was asleep all the time and just had all this time on my hands. And I'd always sort of had it in the back of my mind, you know, should I write it down? And that was the tipping point. I just thought, you know, what, if not now, when, really? So I didn't actually start out writing this story. I just started sort of playing around with children's like short stories because I was a history teacher. I kind of thought, well, I've got to write children's historical fiction. And I like sort of penned like a 20,000 word. It was so awful. A 20,000 word children's story, and it was really bad. But my husband was like, you know, you should try this properly. You should give it a go. And I was kind of struggling. By this point, I'd gone back to work, and I was kind of struggling with work and having a baby at home. I just basically didn't want to be there, and you know, so I thought, oh, well, maybe I will take it a bit more seriously. And that short story, which I guess was a novel, but compared to what I write now, doesn't feel like a novel. That got me an agent, actually. And I guess it became apparent, though, that my heart wasn't in children's historical fiction, you know, and I really wanted to write. What I read is contemporary fiction, and that's what I wanted to write. So I was lucky that my agent sort of stuck with me while I did a massive U-turn and wrote a completely different thing. So it's not the first thing I've ever written, but it's the first like full adult novel that I've ever written, which, you know, I know I'm incredibly lucky for it to have worked out the way that it did, really. And I'm as surprised as anyone to find myself here, to be honest. You know, but it did take a long time. It took, you know, because I had 2 other children in that time. And obviously I got the book deal 2 years ago as well. So, you know, it's been a long time waiting for publication date too.
Especially with COVID and everything, that slowed everything down.
Yeah, so. Exactly. Yeah. And I think there was COVID, and I was at home with children, so I couldn't be as productive as I wanted to be. Like, my husband's a key worker. So I think there was like a lot of things that slowed it down. And I think traditional publishing just is like incredibly slow. It's so different to teaching, which is really fast paced. So that's been a real, you know, shift to get used to, that we're talking about 2-year timescales. And yeah, it just seemed crazy to me. But yeah, it is the first thing I've ever written. And I think it was pretty, you know, it was a pretty smooth process, really, which I'm massively paying for with book 2, which is almost killing me. So, like, even though I got off lightly with my first book, my second one is really making me suffer. So hopefully people would hold the first, you know, reasonably easy journey against me.
Yeah. Okay, so, I mean, you mentioned that your husband read that first children's story and then encouraged you to keep writing. Do you have like a writing group or critique partners that you kind of bounce your work around with?
Yeah, I was kind of lucky because so one of my NCT friends who had a little girl at the same time as I had my first, she self-published one of her, like a memoir. She'd been through sort of IVF, and she just self-published like a sort of memoir of that, which did really well, and also meant she had kind of an in to the local writing community. So through her, I sort of like wormed my way in, and also through COVID, I did like a writing group online, which was really nice because it was like a Saturday and I'd just be like, well, I'm going to my writing group, no one can talk to me for 3 hours or whatever. And it was the first time that I'd sort of really read anything out to anyone who wasn't my agent, and it was just nice to get sort of some feedback and for people to say, oh, it's not trash, you know, which is what I kind of always think people are going to say whenever I show them anything, like, oh my goodness, that's awful, you know, what are you doing? No one said that. So that was really nice. And and I made some really good friends sort of in the local community, because I live in Bradford, so, you know, right in the north, so there's not like a huge presence up here. You feel like publishing doesn't kind of extend up here, and even though my agent and my editor and everyone are obviously London based, and I can sometimes feel like I'm sort of just floating around on my own, you know, with no sort of link to the publishing industry. So it's nice to have some local people who are involved in it too. So yeah, I did an online group. I'd already written it by then, to be fair. So I'm not sure how helpful it was, because I just kind of got stressed anytime they said, oh, you should change this. And I was like, well, I've already submitted it. Now what am I going to do? So for a while, I just kind of went along just for fun and for a few hours to avoid my family. But but it was good. And I've stayed in touch with them all, and, they've all been really supportive, which is lovely.
Yeah, I mean, it's, as a community, the writing community is generally very, very supportive and friendly. So your agent is Hannah Wetherill at Northbank Talent. What stage of the process did you sign with Hannah, and how did that sort of come about?
Yeah, so I signed with Hannah's predecessor, which was Chloe Segar, who I think you've had on the podcast.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, so I signed with her, and then Chloe left and Hannah sort of took over, which was kind of strange because I'd gotten on so well with Chloe. I'd been down to meet her, and she's super friendly, and we'd gotten on really well. And that was, I think, Hannah taking over was my first experience of, I think, what publishing is like, where there is quite a lot of change and you have to be, used to that. And I found it a bit unsettling at first, but honestly, Hannah is amazing. She's absolutely brilliant at what she does. And, she's a very calm person. I'm not a very calm person. So I think we work together really well. I mean, she tells me to calm down a lot. But yeah, it was, I'd only written sort of a draft by that stage. And so Hannah really did all of the edits, and we worked on all of the edits together. And I really like how she works. I really liked Chloe too. And I'm sure if Chloe hadn't left, it would have been, it would have worked out just as well. But yeah, I think Hannah and I are a good match because she's so level-headed and she keeps calm. When we were on submission with My Extraordinary Life, I was just a total wreck. And then we got the offers, and we had a few offers, so Hannah was sort of playing them off against each other a little bit, and I was just like, Hannah, can we just sign? And she was like, no. And then we'd meet the potential editors, and she'd be like, Beck, stop smiling so much and don't agree to anything. And I was just like, you could probably see my smile from space. I was so happy to be having the conversations. And she was like, and no kisses on the end of emails. So she had nerves of steel. I would have signed everything over straight away, and with the first person who offered. And I'd make a joke where she would, she'd written this pitch letter, and I'd sort of make a joke and put at the bottom PS, we don't care if we get paid here, and she'd delete it and be like, this is not funny, we do care if we get paid. But I think I just didn't expect anything to come of it, so I was kind of not taking it. I didn't have any expectations at that stage because I'd read all these stories about how horrifically hard it was. So I just thought, there's no chance that anything is going to come of this. So I was just having a sort of relax and a laugh about it. And then when we did get the offers, I was really, really surprised. And Hannah loves contracts and stuff, and she kept saying, let's go through the contracts again. And I just feel not listening to a word she said because I was just so happy that we had an offer. And even now, we have to go back and check my contract whenever something was up because I wasn't paying any attention to any of the initial discussions about it.
But that's amazing. It was a 3-way auction in the end, right?
Yes, that's right. Yeah.
That's so good, especially for a debut. And then in the end, it was Molly Crawford at Simon and Schuster that picked it up, right?
Yes, that's right. Yeah.
So is she the person that you've been working with as an editor to finalize it for publication?
Yeah, she is. So Hannah is quite involved, editorially, but Molly is. I would say she is fantastic at the editorial side of things. I think that's really her strength. And when I sort of got my first set of structural edits, so there's a 3-step process. All these structural edits come first, and they're the sort of big ones. I remember just reading them and thinking oh my goodness, I can't do these. There's no way I can do these. And, it took a little while, but she was so right in everything she said. And she kept saying, you can disagree with me. It's fine. Like, you don't have to. But they were all absolutely spot on. And, my writing group who'd read the sort of early draft, when they read a draft after I'd done these edits, they were like, they were so right. So I'm very lucky, I think, that I've gotten to work with Molly, because she's just ridiculously clever. She's got such a good eye for this sort of thing. And I think as well, like, her background is, I think she was like a care worker or something else. She worked in social care before. Her background is of someone who I think really gets relatable fiction. I think that's what she's drawn to as well. So I think it was really good that we were coming at it from the same angle. And, if ever Emily wasn't relatable, and I'd missed it, Molly could pick it up. So yeah, I've been ridiculously lucky. I mean, it'll probably all come crashing down at some point, but so far, it's been a really good journey. I hate that word, but it has been a really good journey so far.
I mean, it sounds like you take, because some people, and I've had quite a lot of debut authors on here, and they do find it quite challenging when they get to working with an editor, and especially like structural edits, where they say, oh yeah, we're going to have to do some big changes here and move some things around. But it sounds like you take critique extremely well.
I don't know. I think I don't think I'm like particularly precious. I think I just come at it from a point of view of, we're on the same page, and that is that we both want the book to be as good as it can be. And like, I fully accept that I'm a total novice at this, really. Aside from having written this book, I don't actually feel like I know how to write a book. And, I've never done like a creative writing course. My degree isn't even English. I was a historian. So I don't feel like I'm in a position where I can sort of come back and say, well, no, you're wrong and I'm right, because they do know more than me. I'm like completely happy to accept that people know more about this than I do. I mean, maybe a couple of books down the line, I'll feel like I have more that I can say. But yeah, at the minute, I mainly just sort of sit and smile through everything. I do think there is a bit of, I have absolutely crippling imposter syndrome, like a lot of the time. And I do think that is part of it, that I don't feel like I could challenge something. I don't feel like there's anything that I've wanted to challenge yet, but I don't know how I would react if there was. I don't know how I'd navigate it if I really disagreed on a comment or something like that. So I think then I would really struggle, but I haven't felt like I've been in that position so far. And yeah, I think I always just come back to that thing of, our interests are aligned in that we both want the book to be good. So she's not going to tell me something that would, in her opinion, make the book worse. So I have tried to just go into it all with an open mind, really. Also, my parents are really critical, so maybe I'm just used to being criticised and just taking it on the chin. I don't know. But yeah, like some of my structural edits are like 7,000 words. So we're like 7,000 words long, and I remember thinking like, oh, so this is a lot of criticism, And then there'll be like one line of like, great, good job. However, here we go. And I remember thinking like, wow, you need to have like, a thick skin really to get through this. But I'm not sure why I find it okay. I
think you nailed it at the start as well by saying, you can't be that precious about these things.
No, I'm not precious at all. I mean, the book has a different title to the one I had, but again, I just think, I called it the life list, which, to be fair, whenever I said it, people thought I was saying the lifeless and that I'd written some sort of like horror thriller ghost story. So it's probably good that it's been changed. But I also think, I'm no marketer, and the marketing people know what's going to appeal. So I'm happy to, even though my extraordinary life is quite a mouthful, I do think it fits the book better than the life list did, or the lifeless, as everyone thought it said.
Yeah, well, it definitely fits better than the lifeless. I have to agree with that. Well, the lifeless would be very on theme right now, given that it's just past Halloween.
Yeah, true. Yeah.
But if you, before we get on to the final question, I do like to sort of ask people through the journey that you've had with, publishing your first book, if you could go back to when you sort of first started writing, when you first decided to sort of take this seriously and give yourself some advice, now that you've gone through it all, what would that advice be?
I think, well, the piece of advice I always sort of chuck out whenever anyone asks me this question is probably not really writing advice, but when I was younger, I listened to this speech by Tim Minchin, and I think he's speaking to university students who are graduating. And
I think I've seen that.
Yeah, it's great. The whole thing's great, but the one bit that I really like is where he says, it's all luck. And I just think it can apply to publishing. It applies to life, but it can apply to publishing really well, because I think there is a huge element of luck in it. And I've got friends who I think are great writers who haven't got book deals. And I think it can apply to both sides. If you are really successful in publishing and in writing, then you need to remember that there is a lot of luck involved. And because you need to stay humble, otherwise you're going to be unbearable to be around. My book got picked up, I think, hopefully because it's half decent, but because of COVID, and people were looking at that time for uplifting stories because we were all a bit miserable from being stuck inside for a year. So, it was definitely a case of right place, right time, or at least that played a part in it. So I think you have to remember that there's an element of luck in it. And at the same time, if things don't go your way, it's not a personal judgment on you, and it's not a criticism of your character. It's just bad luck.
Yeah.
I think you need to have that kind of level of detachment from it, because it's a really brutal industry. To say that everyone is absolutely lovely, it's quite cutthroat as well. And I think there are so many things that are beyond your control. All you can do is concentrate on the words that you put on a page. And beyond that, it's just luck. And, if it goes your way, great. But remember, it's just luck. Like, you're not responsible for the bit of your brain that's allowed you to write a book and do well. So, don't take too much credit for it. And if it doesn't go your way, well, it's not a judgment of you. It's just a bit of bad luck. So don't pin everything on it. I think don't pin your happiness on getting a book deal, because no one thing is a magic bullet to making us happy. And, a book deal is the same.
No, 100%. That's very good, very wise advice, because so many things do have to line up, as you say, like time, place, but also people. Like, you need to be sending your submission to the right agent at the right time for them. Because you never know if you sent your submission, one day later, maybe they signed someone the day before who was writing something very similar to you, and that's the same with the publisher. And like, it's all these little things that have to line up for it all to end up in you kind of riding that wave all the way through.
Yeah, absolutely. And I get quite a lot of people message me and sort of say, what advice would you give? I want to get a book deal, and I always think, you can't really concentrate on the book deal aspect of it, because, if you read the statistics about getting a book deal, that just no one would bother trying because they're horrific. But when things do line up, then that's great. But there are a lot of variables in that. And then that goes all the way through as well, even once the other side of publication. There are so many things beyond your control. You can't, that go into making something either successful or not. All books that are published are decent, because they wouldn't have got that far otherwise. But yet some do amazingly and some don't. And I think it's, there's so much beyond your control. I mean, I say all this, I don't listen to my own advice at all, because I will determinedly try and control absolutely everything. I translated 48 German reviews last night, to check how it was going over there. So, I don't listen to my own advice, but I know what it should be.
Okay, good. So I was going to say, well, that's extremely wise, but do as you say, not as you do.
Exactly. Yes, that's
Indeed.
my advice. I've changed my mind.
For everyone listening, do what Rebecca's saying, not what she actually does.
Yeah, 100%.
Amazing. Well, that brings us on to the final question, which, as always, is: if you were stranded on a desert island with a single book, which book would you take?
Okay, yeah. So I thought about this quite a lot, probably more than is potentially normal. And I mean, if I'm taking it literally, I really should take a Bear Grylls type survival guide, because otherwise I'm going to be dead within hours. So I have literally no survival skills at all. So, but I'm not going to say that. I'm going to pick A Thousand Splendid Suns by Claire Tassini, which is potentially like a depressing book to be taking to a desert island, because the subject matter is awful at times. But I actually think, even though it has really difficult subject matter, it's a testament to the fact that even in the darkest of times, the optimism of like the human spirit does win out at all points at the book. And so I think that it would be a nice book to read on desert island, because you would be, used to that sort of sense of other people that go through really difficult times, but actually there's always hope to be found, which is probably a very naive and very, simple worldview, but it's the one that I'm sort of sticking with. So yes, A Thousand Splendid Suns.
It's a great choice. And I think it's a very healthy, some people might call it naive, but I think it's a very healthy worldview. You always need to find some hope in every action that you're doing, I think, just to keep going, just to kind of get the energy to continue.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's you read the news or you see what's going on and you think, gosh, it's really hard to keep a sense of optimism at times. But I think we have to, and I think all through history, humans, that's what endures, is that even in really difficult times, the human spirit it's pretty resilient. And so I really like that thought that there's always good to be found. Yes, in everything.
I think that's a wonderful choice. A great addition to the Desert Island Library. Well, thank you so much, Rebecca, for coming on the podcast and sharing your experience with writing your debut and going through the publishing process for the first time. It's been really interesting and really fun chatting.
No, thank you. It's been lovely. I've really enjoyed myself.
And for anyone listening, if you want to keep up with everything that Rebecca is doing, you can follow her on Twitter at WriteBexWrite, or on Instagram and TikTok at BexRyanAuthor. Her debut novel, My Extraordinary Life, is out January 5th, 2023. And to make sure you don't miss out on any episodes of this podcast, follow us on Twitter at Right and Wrong UK, or on Instagram and TikTok at Right and Wrong Podcast. Thanks again to Rebecca, and thanks to everyone listening. We'll catch you in the next episode. Thanks for hanging around until the end. If you're interested in starting your own podcast but aren't really sure what that looks like, I can't recommend Zencastr enough. It's so simple to host, record, and download your podcast with, and it even has a built-in transcription AI. It functions entirely in the internet browser, which means all your guests have to do is click on a link and they'll be brought into the conversation. If you click on the link in the description, you'll get 30% off the first 3 months. All you have to do is click on the link in the description. Thanks again for supporting the show, and we'll see you in the next episode.